Welcome. I'm Janus CEO and founder of Ella Group, Executive Search Advisors, where we are reimagining search through our longstanding commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you for joining me today in our webinar series with Gian, founder and CEO of TLC Lions, where we are going to be discussing the power of storytelling, unleashing a company's full potential. Impacting millions of people, TLC Lions drives culture change using science-backed technology training and experts to make a positive impact in the way employees think, feel, and behave at work. Gian was an entrepreneur from a young age, starting up his first business at the age of 13, and then later worked in corporate America at Deutsche Bank and PwC. And he saw the fragility of mental well-being in employees, and also from his own tragic personal experience. Gian left corporate America and founded TLC Lions to focus on the power of storytelling and answering key questions around mental well-being. Gian, thank you so much for joining us today. It is a delight to see you, and you have such an amazing story. I really want you to share it with the world. So before we get into the actual business of today, tell me how you started at 13 as an entrepreneur, and what did that mean? What business were you in?
Well, thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here. And going straight into being 13. What was I doing? Well, trying to be good at school. That was for starters. But no, what I actually started doing it was when I was 13, when I launched my first business, I was actually going to a theatre production as part of my English class. Being a bit of a geek at school, I remember watching this production, and I said to the guy who owned the theatre, "Can I get a copy of this, like a DVD?" And he turned around and he was like, no, we don't have them. I said, "What do you mean you don't have them?" He said, "We can't afford to get them done." Now, I know we're in 2022, 2023 now, where we don't even use DVDs, but back then, he could only get 1,000, 2,000 at a time produced. And so I said, "Well, how many do you need?" He said 150. So I thought, well, let me go and find a machine. So I took a loan from my school and started copying them in the hundreds. And lo and behold, in the local area, everybody wanted them. So 13 to 15, I ran this called Zest Productions. It was a DVD manufacturing business. Not that sexy, not that cool today, but hey, I thought it was great at the time and it taught me a lot.
I heard you also bought soap in Dubai and then sold it in London. Is that true?
You know what it is? My father lived in Dubai, and you know these like service departments, they would have all this soap and nobody used it. And I was like, I think I could take this back to school in England and sell it. So I did, bunch it up for Christmas. No problem. People loved it.
So no wonder you left corporate America. You had this ingrained in you at a very early age to run your own business. And I think the beginning of that does start, though, with your own personal experience, very tragically. So I know this is sometimes painful to talk about, but you talked about the storytelling and sharing sometimes what are horrific experiences that we have and needing to do that. So tell us about the founding of TLC Lions, your own experience.
Yeah, I mean, so after that kind of 15, I went off to university, and as you mentioned, Deutsche Bank, and then I went to PwC. And if I'm honest, Janus, when I joined PwC, I've always been very competitive, very numbers driven. And if somebody mentioned empathy, storytelling when I joined there, didn't really think about it. And just some time into joining the firm, life started to take quite a drastic turn. And it was the 7th of May in 2015, and it was a day like any other. I headed into the office, and that morning my dad called me and said, "Hey son, I've got to go overseas on business." And I thought, okay. He said, "I've got to go tonight." Pretty last minute. Spoke to my dad and off he flew. Now, I'll be honest, a few days passed and I was at work, didn't hear from him, but time difference, travel time, I thought he's just busy. And after a few days, more days, I realized nobody had heard from my dad. And at that time, I just hoped, prayed, whatever it is that you do, that dad was going to take a return flight back to the UK. But the day came when the airline called me and they told me my dad wasn't on the flight and it had gone. And at that point, I ran out of my office and I declared my dad missing internationally, and I had no idea what I was doing. And for about 3.5 weeks, then I campaigned on the media to try and find my dad. With police, the government, solicitors, just doing everything I could. And then there was a glimmer of hope, because BBC Worldwide called me and said, look, we've seen what's going on. Come into the studios. We'll put you around the world. And so that morning I was about to go into the studios, but as I left the house that morning, the phone was just ringing. And I said to my sister, answer the phone. And she did. And it was a news reporter on the other end who just said, are you the children of Ranjit Singh Power? And we said, yeah, have you found our dad? They said, your dad's been murdered and we've just pulled out his body. And today I speak openly about this, and sometimes I cry and I feel whatever emotions, I express them. But back then, Janus, it was a tricky time, and I'd lost my best mate, my role model. He was the one who inspired those businesses at a young age, and I knew that I had to go on. And I kind of, a bit of a whirlwind stop there as I took 3 months out from work, who were really supportive. And it showed me at the time the need to have teams who feel like second families, and leaders who were more like village elders. And I thought, at the same time, my story was in the media, and a lot of leaders started sharing their stories with me, personal stories that I'd never shared. And I just saw that storytelling, it didn't make any of us less professional, it just made us more human. And it was that started to inspire me that we've got to do more.
But you went back to corporate America, right? You didn't start up TLC Lions right away. So you
Exactly.
but mentally, this was really took a toll on you. And I understand you saw this in other people too, in terms of their own personal experiences. So how long then after did you start TLC Lions?
Exactly. This was 2015, 2016, and I stayed at PwC for a few years for many reasons. One, to finish off my accounting qualifications, and Dad would have wanted that. But also, I was in a very, very difficult, expensive legal battle. And as a 23-year-old then, it was very, very intense to try and balance everything in my job. And I had to stay there for financial security as well. But something else happened, Janus, was that when I went back to work, people who know me, I like to smile, I'm default optimism, I'll always keep on going. But one day when I went back to work, something else happened. And that was a colleague of mine who I joined the company with, young, happy, smiley guy. One morning he went into our offices and nobody knew he was struggling. And that afternoon, he was struggling too much that he ended his life. And I remember going outside that afternoon, and I sat and I looked up at the office and I just thought, how many more people are walking into these offices every single day and we know nothing about them? Nothing. We think we do, but we haven't taken the time to get to know them on a deeper level. Something has to change. And so it was a bit of time until 2017, 2018. I thought, enough is enough. It's time to drive this forward.
So tell us about the beginning of this, how you started it, and then what you provide to organizations, to companies. Because I know you've impacted over 2 million lives, I understand, right? That's what I see on your website. I mean, with a very clear mission about humanizing, organizations. And when we talk about that, that's about trust too, right? When we understand each other and we really know each other. So tell me how you started this and now what you're providing to companies.
Yeah, I mean, it's been such a whirlwind in the last 4 years, and it's thanks to firstly the support of our team and those around me who've made it happen. But in 2018, this was never supposed to be an organization. I'll just put this out there. It was going to be a podcast. And Deloitte had released a report on well-being in the workplace at the end of 2017. And I read this report and I went to the author. I messaged them and I said, can you spare me the time? This lovely lady met me for a coffee in London. And I told her, I want to create a podcast of people's stories of how they've overcome adversity. She said, you need to take this bigger. The trend is growing. Mental health in the workplace isn't stopping. People are struggling. It's costing countries billions. And so suddenly I turned it into an organization called TLC Lions. And Lion is mine and my father's middle name. TLC is Tender Loving Care. And our mission, as you beautifully put, is to humanize the working world through the power of storytelling. And so what we do is everything is underpinned in the science of storytelling as our teaching approach. And there's three things that we do. The first thing is we've got around 60 of the world's most powerful storytellers, all with their own stories, but they understand the corporate world. And we help organizations to smash the stigma around certain topics, whether that is mental health, if that's racial inequality, gender inequity, whatever it might be. We want to give everybody a voice so they share their stories to help raise awareness. The second thing, though, is actually training skills, business critical skills that I don't like calling them soft skills, they're human skills, communication, listening, agility, resilience, these words through stories. And the final thing is we train the skill of telling your own story.
Well, you and I've talked about this. Sometimes we talk about TMI, too much information. So the training of how you tell a story, how you deliver a story is really important. And when I think about Wall Street and the speed at which, people are asked, even when it's remote or a hybrid working situation, to produce work, how does one connect with people as a leader to do this, where people feel, oh, I have enough information, I trust this person, I can still get the work done, but he or she understands me. How do you train people to do that when there are demands on them to get work out to meet client needs?
And I think first thing on that, which I'll be clear on, is I am all about high performance, effectiveness, efficiencies, and I'm also about being really human, kind, caring, and compassionate. And I think one thing I've learned, Janus, is that they're not mutually exclusive. And being a human leader and being an effective leader, for me, they're actually a necessary partnership for us to attract the best talent for tomorrow. Now, how do we do that? It does start with that manager, that leader, because we know people are afraid to speak up. They're afraid to have a voice, especially if they've got a boss who is not creating that environment. So my ask is to those leaders who might be listening right now is to say, it takes courage. It takes a bit of sharing your own story, whatever you're comfortable with, to open up. Well, we know, and I'm not going to get too scientific on us, but the neuroscience behind that is we know if you share with your team, it's going to release oxytocin in their brain. They're going to start to feel a lot more connection and trust between you. And guess what? They're going to open up too. Now, there is that balance you said about TMI. And I think it's just being a good human being. Now, I think having an open conversation with them, every person, it can be TMI, different regions of the world, will struggle with sharing more information, less information. I think you set the tone as a leader at the end of the day and just be there to listen to people. I don't necessarily think it's too much information. I think you meet people who are more closed, people who might share too much. I think it's more not necessarily by region either. It's just let people be and give them the time to listen. They're going to work harder for you.
And you have done these programs for major corporations around the world, and you've done them, I think, multiple times in terms of coming in and starting the process. How long does it take to really get leaders to feel, my people feel they trust me, that I feel good about their mental well-being, my mental well-being, because it is a huge issue. And, we see these suicides, and we see so many things that are really, I think, how do we change the world to really embrace it so people don't feel scared, that they do trust others, say, I have a problem, I need to deal with something at home. Can I talk to my boss about this at work?
Yeah, and I think to try and to answer that, I think culture, we know, is like this ever evolving journey. It really, really is ever changing. The impacts of society, a war going on around the world, the murder of George Floyd, the impact of COVID, all these societal impacts are having a huge impact on corporations. And I think one thing is for sure is that it's encouraging, forcing organizations to have a voice, to have a stance, because the Gen Z of the world want to work for an organization with purpose and who will stand up against things. And so I think it is being fast-tracked to say, gosh, we really need to catch up with what's going on in the outside world. Our own cult or culture, it's not going to attract the talent anymore. So I do believe it's fast-tracking because people are not going to attract the talent if they don't, number one. How do we see an impact and how do we do this? First thing, in most of the work that we do, if not all, I will always launch it with somebody from the C-suite. I will interview them on their story. We'll obviously have a pre-conversation in advance of, there's not been a person I've not met who I've said, let's not share that part of your story, because I don't think they were ready. And so I will go quite deep with them, saying, why does storytelling matter here? Why do you care about your people? Tell me, in very real, very straight up conversations. Then we'll roll out the programs that are very, very different and measure the impact as well, which I'm happy to go into.
Yeah, because you really have 5 services, right, that you offer. Can you just take us through those 5 services and the people who are listening and how it might impact them and what they would be most interested in for their culture?
Of course. I mean, the first one are our events. So very powerful 60 to 90-minute events where one of our lions shares their story tailored to that organization. And so rather than the company saying, oh, we're going to bring in a speaker from here and a speaker from there, for employees, it can be quite confusing. We like to say, let's stitch together events over the year, a continuation of a learning program, and smash important topics. The second one is through what we call internal storytelling. Everybody's got a story. Let's help your employees understand what's their story and how by owning their story can actually be their greatest strength, make it the employee and human they need to be or who they already are. So we really train this skill, which is incredibly powerful, and then make that part of an internal campaign. The third one is around training and coaching. So I mentioned there those really business critical skills to understand what is the focus for your early careers, your mid-managers, your leaders, and how do we train them in a different way? Stories have been around for tens of thousands of years. 36 years ago, along came PowerPoint. And guess what? Training changed. And actually, I like to go back to basics, go back to the old way of telling stories and training skills. Another one is through e-learning. Digital learning is absolutely key. Making e-learnings, we've all been there when you click through. Are people absorbing the information? We tell them through a story. People absolutely love them. You kind of get taken on a story of e-learning. And we've done that around inclusive leadership, mental health training, where we actually interview the stories of employees and we embed them into the mental health training. And the final one is around our advisory support. There's so much strategic insight, as I know, Janus, you provide to everybody you meet, providing advice and guidance. From now, there's just over 300 companies. When we work with a new one, we can give such insights to them. So it's a whirlwind tour into the 5.
You talk about the purpose-driven organization. I can tell you that in the executive search world, the candidates that we speak to, they want to see, and it's all ages. It's not just the millennials or Gen Zs. It's really everybody wants to see that the organization is making good and doing good. And they do want to trust their leaders, to save the planet and people and what's happening in society, and where they need to speak out on something to do that, right? You can't speak out on every social issue, but I think there's a lot that you can. So what is the training that maybe you do around that to help organizations, really put forth their purpose so that their employees also understand what their role is in that? And let me stop there. What do you do in that regard? And then I have another question along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, we do things twofold. And so the first one is, of course, working with the organization to understand what are their values, who are they, and make them understand to be intentional about their brand and to be intentional about their culture. Because I think too many companies we see at the moment, there's the say-do gap, which is you see what they're kind of saying on the website looks fantastic, and what they're doing in reality is very different. So we try to close the gap and say, be true to who are you and who are you not? Let's be very intentional. So through workshops and advisory support getting there. However, we know then to embed that, whatever that intentional and those values are, they're no longer dictated by the CEO and passed down through HR. It's the sum of all the parts. So then what we do is we work through storytelling, and we actually do exercises across companies. And we've done this with tens of thousands of employees now to say, how do we now align your life to the purpose of this organization? Why do you work at Microsoft? Why do you work here at Target? How do we align your personal life to the brand? And when we do that, it then creates an amazing campaign of why you are here. And that is just amazing for a brand's reputation internally and externally.
I did a podcast. I do many podcasts, and I did one with Hubert Joly, who is the former CEO and chair of Best Buy. is since retired and now put in a great woman, Corey Berry, to take his place. But he wrote a book, and he said in the book that it was important for people there to really live the values of Best Buy. And he was speaking with one of the directors of one of the stores, and that director said, yes, Hubert, and what I do is I want to make sure that every employee can live their dream here at Best Buy. And the book is The Heart of Business. And it's wonderful because it really does talk about how you can have employees live their dream. So it's not a 4-letter word work, but it's really part of their life, right? So how have you done that? If you can give us some examples of what you've done to try and make that happen in an organization.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things we did, for example, was with Microsoft. You know, they have their corporate values. They're a great client of ours here. And, you know, we look at words like integrity and accountability, which, okay, you can put them at the bottom of an email or print them out near the printers, but what do they actually mean to your people? These values should be part of who you are as a culture. So we then align our storytellers and lions to share their own story aligned with, you know, integrity, accountability, and then people share back. And I will never forget some of the events there of how people shared a story of integrity when somebody showed them high levels of integrity, and they never forget it. The same was at PwC. You know, one of our largest clients around the world, and one of their values is care. You know, this other 4-letter word, but what does that mean? So we actually take their managers and employees through, I call it the graph of life, where their age is on the x-axis, and on the y we put one of their values. So in this case, care. When in their life has somebody shown care? When did they need it most? And then we work with them on those stories, and we create an internal storytelling campaign around care at PwC. It's been incredibly powerful to hear the voice of your own people, but told in an authentic way and we only do, they're kind of 90-minute trainings, not half day, whole day long, and people love it. And I love hearing their stories.
That's a great example. Now, you have these storytellers around the globe. Give me a little bit of a profile of who they are, how many you have, and where one would listen to some of these stories on your website or through different programs, podcasts that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I feel very blessed that I get to interview so many people around the world on their stories. And, you know, across the United States, we have in Atlanta, Georgia, we have Kevin Hines, one of our lions, who very openly shares about his diagnosis at a younger age with bipolar disorder. And at the age of 19, when he hoped and felt he had everything under control, things began to spiral, and Kevin found himself on the edge of the Golden Gate Bridge. And Kevin struggled that day. And in fact, you know, Janus, he said, as he took the bus to the bridge that day, he said, if one person smiles at me today, I won't do it. Nobody smiled at Kevin that day. And he jumped from the bridge. And he's one of only 34 survivors alive today by some miracle. And he shares his story around suicide prevention, mental health, wellness. How do we communicate with compassion? And for all of us to be here tomorrow. These very, very powerful individuals. And another one is Ian Hockley. Ian was at PwC and then IBM. Really, our lions understand the corporate world. And as you might recall, not so long ago, during the shootings in Sandy Hook, Ian was at school one day, Ian was at work one day, and his son Dylan was in the school. And as you can imagine, what happened that day to his son changed Ian's life forever. And he's had to go on kind of understanding what happened and sharing that, but importantly wants to drive a change, because how many parents in corporate America who go to work worry about their children going to school each day? And so we really try to normalize and destigmatize real topics from society, because they're not happening outside of work. They're happening to our people every single day who are living them. So there's just two little examples.
And you have, again, speakers throughout the globe, right? So you might have speakers in India or in Hong Kong or Australia.
You got it.
Right?
Spain, South Africa, Germany, and different languages too.
Right. So multinationals, you know, who have individuals located in these countries, you provide programs there as well.
You got it, because our work in Asia and then in Japan and China and South Korea, very different. So we have lions there, and quite often we have to roll out on a global basis. So we have to know those geographical nuances, as you say.
Mhm. Where do you see TLC Lions going in the next 5 years? What's the trajectory for you? What would you like it to be and to happen?
For me, it's really clear. Our mission is to humanize the working world. You mentioned 2 million employees at the start. Whilst that sounds a lot of people, in the context of the working world or in the wider world, 7-8 billion, it is absolutely nothing. And so for me, we haven't even scratched the surface of the people around the world who need our support. And for me, Janice, it's, we want to impact workplaces, because if we become more human at work, we can be more human in society. But we also want to impact society, because we learn in society, we can be more human at work. And so how do we go from 2 million to 8 billion? There's a lot of work to do in the next 5 years.
But do people have a reluctance to speak about their mental health issues? Everybody's stressed, right? Because of everything that, you just named earlier, it's going on. And the speed of information comes at us so quickly, and demands, and, hybrid working, that's really adjusted our lives tremendously. But do people have a reluctance, or do you find that they will open up if one of your storytellers leads that discussion and their boss leads the discussion? Or is there reluctance?
I think it does differ by certain regions of the world, but also from company cultures. I think firstly, but you're quite right there. If whether it's our Lions or somebody is willing to take the lead and share, to show it's okay to share. In fact, it's a strength and it's powerful to know yourself. It drives self-awareness and self-regulation of your emotions. It's actually a very powerful leadership skill to know who you are, know your story. If we lead by example, people will share. If organizations say, and I see this all the time, hey, who wants to share their story as part of this campaign? No, I won't even share my data with you around ethnicity for pay gap reporting, let alone anything else, if you don't tell me why. So I think with all organizations, they need to start with why. Why do you want me to share my story? Or why are you rolling out a campaign? Why are we doing these events? Because we want to create a nicer working environment for everyone that's more human. And in you stepping up and doing so, you're going to change the environment for others. Okay, I'll be a part of it. We're doing that with SAP at the moment. That's global, from Argentina to been all around the world with them. And some people were reluctant. I've had one-to-ones with them as well, who are being involved in this. And I say to them, again, don't share that. Share that bit, but I don't think you're ready. And then we take them through 6 steps to sharing. So I want them to be crystal clear. And are you ready to share that? If not, don't do it. We're not in a rush.
Until you're comfortable. Yeah. So you really set it up so there's a comfort level for people, and there's training of the leaders. So to the ultimate leader, the CEO of companies, what would be like 3 to 5 messages you would give to them in terms of what they could do, given what you've seen, what you are doing, what they could do to really also help humanize the work environment, whether it be hybrid or not?
I think, if I was to go with 3 things, I think the first one is listen. I think listening is such a powerful skill. It's that part of the job description of leaders that we never seem to put on, but it is so important. We never see on the job description ability to listen. Yeah, I think it's one of the most important skills to understand how employees are feeling, do employee listening, and to listen to understand, not to respond. That's the first one. I think too, empower those reporting into you and mid-managers as well. They've got a tough time out there. They're reporting upwards, they're looking after people who report into them as well. I think empower them by being a good role model to them, to say, look, this is how you should lead. So I think set the good example at the top, especially to your mid-managers. And I think thirdly, I'm going to call it a bit of a reality check. And I mean this in a nice way, because we're all doing it. We're living in a digital age. And many leaders I met around the world grew up in the industrial age, which is fantastic. Has a huge impact on society to get us where we are today. But leadership for the industrial age is not necessarily relevant for the digital age. And so I think just having that really open and honest look in the mirror and conversation with ourselves, say, do I need to adapt, change any of my traits or leadership style to get ready for what tomorrow needs from me?
Those are really good pieces of advice. And I love the first one because we always say be a good communicator. But first, you have to listen, listen, and then, speaking and listening, right? So we always say that we have 2 ears, so we need to use them. Tell me about the Being Human Award, which is happening in 2023. This is so interesting.
Yeah, it's so exciting. Well, how this happened was earlier in 2022. I was actually out for dinner with the head of people for PwC. We're having dinner in London, and she is the nicest lady, Janus, very human, very humble. And afterwards, I went home and I thought, you know what? I never see people like that receiving an award or recognition. It's often those who great at marketing, can shout the loudest, not always, but a lot of the time. And I thought we need to do more to recognize the human leaders, the quiet ones, the ones who make a difference to our lives and never go recognized. So I thought, well, I'm going to do something about it. So we launched the TLC Lions Being Human Awards with one purpose: to recognize and celebrate human leaders. And so, yeah, so they're going to be taking place in February in London, and we're looking at November in New York City. And we've got 7 categories, as well as a top 50 human leaders list, where they are not ranked. And actually, I say list, it's a cohort, because I'm bringing the 50 together to say, well, how are we going to change the world together? I want all of your minds involved. All of the money and the proceeds are going to charity. And I really believe we need to recognize these people. So I'm really excited. And I hope to have you there, Jenna.
I have it on my calendar.
Good.
Do you think that you will also take this, say, to the United States?
Yeah, that's the plan. So February 2023, now it will be in London, and then looking at November 2023, early November, in the United States. And I can't wait for us, and Janus, with your support as well, to recognize the 50 most human leaders across the United States. And we'll also be looking across the categories at the most human CEOs, leaders, future leaders, and companies. They're the ones we want to work for, and I can't wait to find them across the United States.
So those that are going to be honored in February of 2023, is that on your website? Can we see what the criteria was? How do people find out about this?
Yeah. So you can go to tlclions.com/awards, and on there you can find details of the awards, and you can also go to tlclions.com/shortlist and see all those who've been shortlisted for the awards in February. So there's some amazing people, and I've just shared it. We just went live today, actually, with the 50 human leaders. So I'm really excited just to see so many companies, from Microsoft to Vanguard, Deloitte, Reed Smith, the LA Piper, just the most human people. And it just makes me so happy.
Oh, that's it. So we can see this on your website now. They've been announced. Okay, great. And so this is like not about people who just contributed money, but people who have they nominated by other people for they are, okay. And
they can't nominate themselves. They've been nominated by people.
We don't want to do that.
And it's free to nominate.
Yeah. And so this is going to be held on February 9, correct?
You got it.
In London. And you expect about how many people there?
So we've got about 300 guests in the room.
Great. So what's your parting words? I'm afraid we're going to have to stop after a while, but I know people want to know more. So how do they get to know more about you, your organization, what you can deliver, success stories? What's the best way of finding out more about you and TLC Lions?
Sure. So to find out more, well, I suppose about me, you can find me at Gian Power, Gian Power, on LinkedIn or Instagram, and the organization TLC Lions at tlclions.com. All the information is on the website. And hey, finally, I love people's stories. So if anybody shared their story and wants to share it with me, I read every message. I'm always open to people's stories.
And do you have some of your storytellers on YouTube as well that people can listen to in terms of how they may be working with companies and?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so at tlclions.com/lions, you'll see all of our lions there. And of course, various ones also have video content, TED Talks from around the world to kind of hear their stories, see their stories.
I love the lions around the world and the fact that it's part of your name. So, Gian, give us what parting words of advice you would have for those listeners, those leaders, those who have had tragedy in their lives and want to feel better at work.
I think my parting words are really that, everybody has a story, and sometimes going into our past, it's not always easy. It takes a lot of courage and it can be quite emotional. But honestly, take the time, really go into your past. It's taught me so much about who I am today or who I need to become. And I truly believe that everybody's story can become their greatest strength. So spare the time, go into your past, it'll make you who you are.
And make you a happier, more fulfilled person too, right? I mean, honestly, you carry too much like a ball and chain around your leg. That's not a good way to live, or to feel like a victim or victimized. So yeah, there's so much in this world that we really do need to humanize the workplace more. And I think our leaders are trying, I think many of the ones we work with, but I think, you're a strategic partner with LA Group, and I hope that many of our clients will listen today and, tap into you as a resource, because I do think you round out what we do in terms of providing great executive talent, but then, how does that talent really grow in that organization? And how do they grow as a leader to make other people's lives better? And I think that's the expertise that you bring that is really, additive to what we do. So that's why I love having you as a strategic partner. We both share Truett Tate as your chair and Truett Tate as my chair of the Ella Group. So we have a leader next to us sort of driving us to make things work and really drive this partnership. So I want to thank you so much for your insights today, for sharing your incredible story, which is now you're doing so much good in the world to make other lives better. And so we're going to watch more of you on YouTube. I invite our audience today to watch our other webinars, which is on our website, ellagroup.com, and is also on YouTube. So Gian Power, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Janus. Thank you so much.